What is up, Ravens flock? Huge shout out for your support for the 410 Sports Talk. Chance and Glenn are the best in the business. They're killing it right now. They love talking Raven talk. Make sure you go subscribe to their channel. Let's go Ravens. Big trust.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin, and we are excited to introduce a new friend of the show representing the Las Vegas Raiders, and that is Wi-Fi Willie. That's right. We appreciate the love that you're showing your team, and we're excited to talk about it. It's finally here. It is finally week one, and of course, Raiders fans, Ravens fans, we have to wait the longest. But Willie, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate it greatly. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Right now, I just got some kitty problems. They like to join me while I'm doing this show, but excited to talk to you guys about this freaking game and excited for the freaking season to start. It feels like it's been so long, man.
Absolutely. Been a long summer, and we're ready for some football, ready for some fall season sports. So, Glenn, I'll let you kick it off first. Let's get right into it. Let's start the interrogation. No, I'm totally kidding.
Hey, feel free. Yeah.
Want to get your perspective on a few things, when it comes to the Raiders, because you obviously know them better than us. So, Glenn, I'll let you get it kicked off, man.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I look at this team, and the first thing I always do when looking at a opposing matchup is the first thing I stop and see is the stats, right? And the stats show me that you have a top 10 offense from last season, but a 30th ranked defense. So we'll talk about the offense later, but referring to that defense, what have they? First of all, they were 30th in turnovers, right? They were 24th or 26th against passing yards and 24th against the run. What did they do to address that defense? Because the 30th ranked defense isn't going to get it done, especially not in a division where you have the Chiefs, you have the Chargers. What have they done to help bolster that defense?
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. They just started spending more money there. They hadn't done that. Most of the cap had been allocated to the offense for several years. That's what Gruden likes to do. He likes to spend his money where he's calling the shots, right? So I think they just really did spend more money there. Obviously, we can't expect them to be like a great defense. If you already were hitting that low, it is true where it's like, how much more can you really improve? But I think the way they went into thinking about how to construct their team, when you mentioned the Chiefs, is to sort of replicate them, saying that you don't have to maybe have the greatest defense in the world if you have a top 10 scoring offense. And we saw that happen. We saw it come together and then beat the Chiefs. Everything they had worked for, every way in which they designed this team to match up against them, we saw when it could be an A+, when it could all work out on that given Sunday. The problem is just a lack of consistency all around, mainly from former first-round picks. They've just botched first-round picks on defense. Jonathan Abram, yes, he's cool, he's flashy, he's a hothead, he could hit hard, but he's a liability in coverage, especially when they had him playing deep zone sometimes. It's a huge problem. I think he will improve because he's going to play more in the box in Gus Bradley's system. That's going to be very nice for Jonathan Abram. Hopefully he turns it around. Damon Arnett, not sure if he's really even going to see the field, and he's a former first-round pick from the 2020 draft. He is the third best corner on the team at this moment, so unless we're in the nickel, you won't see him much. And then Cleveland Ferrell, that's just a huge problem when your fourth overall pick is not starting on your defense. It is a rotational player, someone who's backing up Max Crosby. Yes, we hit on him in the fourth round, backing up Yannick Ngakoue. So some of these things are unfortunate. I do still think they have talent there, and it just has been underutilized through poor coaching on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, maybe the Raiders ought to take a page out of the Rams playbook, right, and just pawn off all of their first-round picks to other teams and get players in return. Who knows? It's working for the Rams. Maybe it can work for the Raiders. But I wanted to talk about something that you said. I think it's key. Inconsistency. And because, like you said, they beat the Chiefs and they've had some good wins, but also some head-scratching losses, right? So my question is, where does the buck stop? Because for me, when a team is inconsistent, I look at the head coach, the coaching staff, where they have the teams. The coaches aren't out there playing. I get that. But at the same time, I do think that player development and the coaching staff have a lot to do with the consistency of your team. I think the Ravens are to toot the Ravens horn here. I want to talk about the Raiders, but the Ravens consistently have a really good back half of the roster, and I think that's why they're a relatively consistent team. That has a lot to do with player development and coaching. So is there anyone that's looking at Chucky, right, and is like, hey, like, when is this experiment, when is his seat going to get a little hot?
Right. Well, the thing is, John Gruden is the god of, like, the Raiders organization. He's the most famous person on our team, like he's the star. He's our Lamar Jackson. So he's not going anywhere. And I don't think he should go anywhere, because I actually do think, despite what people say, the media narratives about him, I actually do think he has made this team more competitive, more interesting, more dynamic. And he's kind of carried his end of the bargain. Like, he pretty much said, hey, I'm going to take Derek Carr and I'm going to try to make him close to those Pro Bowl numbers that he had in 2016. And I'm an offensive-minded coach. That's what I'm going to focus on. And he gave the Raiders, an amazing offense. This is a great offense, a great player development. You see Waller on a team shining, Jacobs shining, right? And you're in the situation now where the finger was pointed at the defensive coordinator last year, right? And Paul Gunther, who was fired. He looks a lot like Chris Christie, if you haven't seen him, governor of New Jersey. But anyways, now you bring in Gus Bradley, and you bring in also Ron Miles as your DB coach, Richard Smith. These are people with tons of experience, well-renowned, coaches, positional coaches. So he can't really point the finger at the coaching staff this year on the defensive side of the ball, Gruden that is, because they're solidified as great coaches. Everybody agrees that, Richard Smith and Ron Miles, these are great guys, right? So I think he will not take much of the blame. Still, he will still scapegoat somebody else if the team is not that successful this year. And I think a possible scapegoat would be Mike Mayock, because like I mentioned earlier, some of these draft picks have just not hit as hard as you thought they were going to hit. Obviously, you find some gems. You got some Max Crosby's in the 4th round, some Hunter Renfro's in the 5th round. That's great stuff to get. But the problem is your first-round picks aren't working out, right? So he is a possible scapegoat. You often wonder how much Gruden has to, as an influence in the draft. Is he the one drafting poorly? We really don't know. But to be completely honest, 2019, they said the Raiders are going to be last in the division. They ended up being second. 2020, they said we're going to be last in the division. We ended up being second. And I think the same thing's going to happen in 2021. Second, obviously I'm hoping for first, but I'm a realistic fan. I still think they'll take second in the AFC West. And Gruden won't have to apologize much.
It's interesting that when you talk about Derek Carr and the effect that John Gruden has had on him, and while I agree they definitely had a more potent offense last year, it is funny how the kind of the narratives are different, because he had 27 touchdowns and 9 picks, and it was a great year for him, and Lamar Jackson had 26 touchdowns and 9 picks, and there's still a question if he's a running back. So it is interesting that the kind of the dynamic, and despite the fact that he threw the ball like 150 times more, I don't know. It's just interesting the fact that the criticisms aren't always
not fair,
equal
certainly.
there. But here's my hope. I want to see Chucky back in the booth. They have not replaced that daggone Monday night crew since Chucky's been gone. So I'd like to see him back, but I don't think he's going anywhere. Like you said, he is the face of the team. He got the 10-year deal, so he's not going anywhere. So you say they're going to be second in the division, and I think there's a lot of people that would agree with that. But is that second in the division enough to get a wild card playoff spot?
I think it really depends how well they perform against Miami and Pittsburgh and Cleveland. I think these games, playing your division is going to be really critical. And we saw last year the Raiders had to sort of face the AFC East, going up against the Bills and the Patriots, and they just did not match up well. Belichick was probably the only coach I've seen figure out how to shut down Darren Waller. Like, he was the only coach I've seen figure that out.
He'll do that to guys every once in a while.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it's Belichick, and they beat us with Newton somehow, who's unemployed now. But I still think it is a wild card team, and there is an extra spot. A lot of people I see just watching media and news, they're giving the wild card spot to the Chargers, and I just think it's pretty obviously the Raiders. I mean, I know people want to hype up Justin Herbert and all this stuff, but hey, whenever you bring in a new coaching staff, you got all these changes, you're not going to just be great, right, from the get-go. You got to grease the wheels. We can't all be the Browns with Kevin Stefanski, right? So I still think they're going to hit wild card. And, what you're saying about the numbers of Lamar in passing and Derek Carr, how they have comparable numbers. Lamar, it's considered a down year. Derek Carr, it's considered a decent year. I think that really does rely on how much you get the ball. How many possessions do you get, right? And we've seen so many games where the Raiders just don't get the ball that much. The offense doesn't have the ball. The defense is on the field, most of the game, just giving up points left and right. So I think you actually will see an increase in touchdowns generally from Derek Carr this upcoming year, just from getting more possessions.
Yeah, speaking of Derek Carr, I have one more question. One more question about the offense, and it's going to relate to Derek Carr, and then we'll quickly move over to defense when you get your predictions here. But how are the Raiders feel? Like, how do Raiders Nation feel about Derek Carr? Are they split about him? Are they sold on him? You sound like you're pretty sold on him as a player, but I feel like there's always this band of people that want Derek Carr to be gone. Mm-hmm. So where's the pulse, right? Like, where do you see the majority of people? Is his seat hot going into this season?
Well, I think naturally when you're the quarterback, your seat's always hot, right? And we're seeing all these changes happen just I think now more than ever, college QBs can just come in and take over somebody's job, right? So that's always lurking in the background. Obviously, when Mariota was signed, people naturally thought, hey, I like a quarterback competition. And to be completely honest, Derek Carr has been lucky enough to not really have QB competition his whole career. I mean, he's got backups like Matt McGloin, EJ Manuel, Connor Cook. These are the people who are competing, quote unquote, with him. Mike Glennon, right, and Peterman. And so it was really nice this past year to actually, have a little bit of heat under him, kind of artificially, because we know he's our guy. We know Gruden likes his audibles, likes his complex play calls. So you kind of need somebody like Derek Carr there to beat Gruden on the field, and it's kind of too difficult to replace when you have that complex of an offense, right? So it's going to be very difficult for anybody to ever take his job, even in the future, because I feel like Gruden has invested so much into him and building that knowledge. And you've seen the tone change in Raider Nation. There was a split, right? And anytime there was a loss, people were saying, hey, maybe we got to change the quarterback, maybe we got to start over. But now things have really changed. I think I would say about 70 to 80% of Raider Nation is really high on Derek Carr. You still have that 20% that's going to be heavily critical. But for the most part, people like this guy. They saw him throw the ball deep, right? He was, threw the ball deeper than most QBs, had most yards per attempt, right? So you saw him make the changes. I think the critical thing that, even though I don't think it's that significant in John Gruden's offense, because he doesn't really rely too much on improvisation, right? It's kind of just like your first or second read. I still think people are going to be looking at Carr and say, hey, when are you going to run the ball? When are you going to use those legs? When are you going to scramble a little bit more? And that's really the main part of his game that is lacking, is improvisation, scrambling. I really do think, like, Lamar and Mariota and Carr, they're like inverses of each other, right? You got the improv people over here, and then you get the guy who typically goes with his first few reads, right? So I think that would be the trick. And if he doesn't improvise, if a play is shut down and he does throw the ball away, even if that's smart, Raider Nation's going to criticize him.
Yeah, that's a tough criticism, because I know a lot of times the throwaway is the best option on the play. So yeah, that certainly is a tough one there. But now, talking about this game coming up, we know what the Ravens are going to be bringing, right? They're going to bring a high-powered run attack it's just going to look to beat you in the mouth for 4 quarters. And like you mentioned, limit possessions for the opposing offense. That's what they do, right? They churn out long 15-play drives, eat up a bunch of clock, and then force you out of your game plan because now you think you got to score quickly, which really falls into the hands of the Ravens with that secondary that they can bring. So when I look at the stat, again, I said they were 30th against the run last year. I'm sorry, 24th in yards, but 30th in touchdowns against the run. Where's your confidence level that they can slow down this run attack? Because yeah, JK's not out there, but Gus the Bus is still there, and Lamar Jackson, more importantly, is still there. How can they slow down the Ravens rush attack?
Well, I think generally you're just going to see an improvement with a more simplified scheme. I mean, just Paul Gunther's scheme last year, it was just really difficult for several players. You've even had Tahir Whitehead, who's now on the Panthers, our linebacker, in previous years complaining about the scheme. Tons of former players complain about it. So I think generally you'll see improvements there. One big problem for the Raiders defense last year was defensive tackle. Nose tackle is a little solidified with Jonathan Hankins, but that 3-tech position, defensive tackle position, there's always kind of just been a hole here. We expected Maurice Hurst to be the guy, right, who fell in the draft and came to our team, but now he's gone. And they really did a really good job bringing in a lot of defensive tackles. So if you got Gerald McCoy, right, former Pro Bowl player, and I was originally kind of like, whatever, aging player, just having a final year with us. But when you saw him in preseason, this guy was explosive. I mean, he looks recovered from whatever injury he had. So I actually expect Gerald McCoy to play as well as he did prior to the injury, pretty close to that. And then you got Quentin Jefferson from former Seahawks, so he's going to fill in and do pretty well. Darius Philon, who played with the Chargers when they beat the Ravens, right? He has some experience getting his hands on Lamar Jackson, so you have him there too. So generally, do think you'll have big improvements against the run, mainly because of the improvements in interior defensive tackle.
There you go. Well, Willie, why don't you give us your prediction for the game? We're excited to hear it. How's it going to turn out, man?
It's interesting because you said how the Ravens kind of work their way up and down the field. The Raiders typically take a lot of clock off, too. These are both run-first teams. But I think ultimately, though, I think both defenses will have their hands full, So I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I'm going to give it 35-31. I'm giving it to my Raiders. I think Justin Tucker will get his little field goal in, at some point. But I'm going to give it to my Raiders. I'm going to go 35. And, hey, home field advantage, keep in mind, the Raiders only won 2 games at home last year. So this is going to make an impact. We didn't have fans last year.
Right.
This crowd.
Totally agree. Yeah. Well, certainly not, no knock for picking your own team. We totally get it. We had a Steelers guy pick the Steelers when they had Duck Hodges as the starting quarterback in 2019. So certainly we totally get it. It's going to be an awesome matchup. I think there's a lot of intrigue. And so make sure you guys check out Wi-Fi Willie. If you're a Raiders fan, if you're an NFL fan, check him out on YouTube. And then anywhere you look him up, anywhere you're on social media as well. Appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks for the time and have a great evening.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.